Hello, good afternoon to Midday Report here on TVP World. I'm your host, Marie Cato. US President Donald Trump warned of severe consequences for Russia if it continues to block peace in Ukraine during Friday's meeting in Alaska. The European leaders are intensifying efforts to convince Trump to not allow Russia to redraw Ukrainian borders.
Donald Trump says Vladimir Putin is going to face consequences if he doesn't agree to stop the war in Ukraine during the meeting in Alaska on Friday.
There will be consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
Trump also said a second meeting with Putin could follow if the first one goes well. His comments followed a conversation with European leaders who are appealing to Donald Trump to not let Russia change Ukraine's borders by force. Trump assured his partners that his priority is to achieve a ceasefire and that he wouldn't make territorial concessions to Russia without Ukraine's involvement.
Fundamental European and Ukrainian security interests must be safeguarded in Alaska. That was the message we Europeans conveyed to US President Trump. And I can say that we were in broad agreement both on the assessment of the current situation and on the achievable goal for next Friday.
According to a report by Politico, U.S. President Donald Trump told the European leaders that the U.S. could provide Ukraine with security guarantees.
Now it seems that Donald Trump really does understand, not just talking about it, but really he understands that no real deal may be made, especially in very sensitive areas of territory, but not only, that no deals may be made without Ukraine.
The diplomatic efforts continue in the build-up to the meeting, with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky meeting British Prime Minister Keir Starmer in London today.
Europe really stood behind Zelensky. Europe kind of awakened, started to rearm itself. We have this, additional budget of close to 800 million euros. So with all of it, the meeting between Trump and Putin can actually go much better for Europe than it would have has it happened like 6 months ago.
According to Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk, more is at stake in Alaska than just Ukraine.
The Russian side would very much like to include also the topic of security and defense posture of not only Ukraine, but also countries like Poland in its talks and negotiations, and in the final arrangements when it comes to peace in Ukraine.
The Russian delegation to Alaska includes the foreign minister, a presidential advisor, plus the ministers of defense and finance, as well as the CEO of Russian Direct Investment Fund. The summit will be held at the Elmendorf Air Force Base in Anchorage. The presidents will talk one-on-one, accompanied just by their translators. The talks are then to be continued in the expanded format, including aides and government officials.
Polish President Karol Nawrocki and Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk have just wrapped up their meeting at the presidential palace. This was their first face-to-face conversation since Nawrocki took office. One of the topics discussed was Ukraine. Our reporter Sonia Agata-Biszczan is at the presidential palace. Good afternoon, Sonia. What more do we know about this meeting?
Good afternoon, Marie. To be honest, we don't know a lot. The briefing was short, but let me tell you about the backdrop against which this meeting happened, which might give us some more clues as to what this conversation was about and what the future following this meeting could be. So this meeting took place against the backdrop of the Wednesday conference calls with the European leaders and the U.S. leaders, as well as ahead of the Friday meeting in Alaska between the U.S. President Donald Trump with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Of course, all of these conversations are surrounding Ukraine and the security situation in Europe. What is interesting is that in the Wednesday conference call with the European leaders and with the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, it was Donald Tusk, the Polish Prime Minister, that was representing Poland. And frankly, that is a familiar setup because Tusk has been representing the country in similar discussions leading to this one. What is interesting is that in the subsequent conference call with the U.S. President Donald Trump and the Vice President J.D. Vance, it was Karol Nawrocki, the Polish president, who represented the country. Tusk commented on this situation and said that ordinarily, and according to the Polish constitution, it is the government that conducts foreign policy and not the president. However, he said that at the request of the American side, which prefers to do diplomacy on the presidential level, it was eventually Karol Nawrocki who represented the country. Also, ahead of the meeting, the press representatives of the presidential office noted that Karol Nawrocki, or generally presidential office, hopes for a cooperation on foreign policy between the government and the presidential office. However, is this the case? We haven't heard much in the briefing about the cooperation. Following the meeting, Donald Tusk took to X, the social media platform, and wrote that the one thing on which the president and him agreed 100%, it is that they have fantastic families and children. And to be honest, this probably doesn't inspire much confidence in the cooperation. Having said that, let me also focus on what Tusk said prior to the meeting, perhaps speaking a bit more seriously. He said that we need to act together, acknowledging that the discussions pertaining to Ukraine are also important for Poland and for Europe and their security. Back to you.
Thank you. Sonia Gata-Biszczan reporting from in front of the presidential palace in Warsaw. According to Lithuania's Deputy Defense Minister Tomas Godliauskas, Russia and its ally Belarus won't be sending more than 30,000 troops to the Zapad joint military drills in September. On Thursday, Godliauskas said the Zapad 2025 drills will be significantly smaller than those conducted in 2021. He added that, according to estimates, no more than 30,000 soldiers can participate in the exercises, with 6,000 to 8,000 soldiers already deployed on Belarusian territory, several thousand in the Russian enclave of Kaliningrad, and the rest in units located deep inside Russia. He also highlighted that there is no intelligence indicating that the number of soldiers taking part in this year's exercises could reach 100,000 to 200,000. Lithuania's Army Chief of Staff, Raimundas Vaiks-Noras, said that country's army will increase its readiness in August and September in response to the drills. Peter Magyar, chairman of Hungary's opposition party, has denounced a claim by Russian intelligence that he is backed by the EU, calling it a blatant election interference and disinformation. The Russian Foreign Intelligence Service has alleged that the European Union is working to bring Magyar to power in Hungary, possibly by the spring 2026 elections, a claim Hungarian public media published without alteration. In response, Magyar underlined that the TISA party's battle against the Fidesz party is in the name of an independent Hungary, while the party itself rejected the Russian statement as, quote, obvious disinformation. Wednesday evening saw clashes erupt between Serbian anti-government protesters and supporters for a second day running after more than 9 months of demonstrations against President Aleksandar Vučić. The latest protest was organized in response to incidents on Tuesday evening in the town of Vrbas, where riot police separated protesters from opposing camps outside the ruling party's offices.
Supporters of President Vučić repeatedly hurled flares at protesters who gathered near Serbian Progressive Party offices in Novi Sad. Protesters then smashed its windows as riot police were deployed outside to guard the building. At the same time, thousands more gathered in other parts of Serbia, including the capital, Belgrade, where riot police used tear gas to disperse groups of anti-government demonstrators. Supporters of the Serbian president who gathered in the country's capital were joined by Aleksandar Vučić himself, who had this to say about the clashes in Novi Sad.
Terrible things were done tonight in Novi Sad. They are still doing them. But when you show will and desire to solve things with peace, endurance and patience, then you always bring victory in the end.
Officers also intervened to separate two opposing camps in the town of Kraljevo, Kragujevac, Čačak and Niš. Interior ministers said that at least one policeman was injured, but did not say whether there were injured among the protesters.
Europe is battling devastating fires as an intense heat wave moves through the continent, with local residents and tourists alike fighting not only for their survival, but also to save their livelihoods.
This may look like winter arrived in Greece, but the reality is a hell of a lot worse. This is what's left behind after a devastating fire, and it's the new reality all over Europe. Many people risk their lives trying to salvage their homes and belongings, sometimes getting saved in return.
I was using everything to keep the flames out. For example, to fight the smoke. This napkin saved my life. I put some water on it, but it stayed more wet with sweat. This napkin saved my life.
To many, material things are perishable. The lives of their loved ones are what matters most.
My husband fought hard with the flames, but I am so happy that my husband is alive. I don't want to know about what we lost. I will work to recreate it again. The only victory we had is that my husband is alive.
Even tourists are painfully aware of the dire future awaiting their holidays.
Well, it's quite impressive. We're in between two fires. It's been going on for several days. It's going to surround us. There are woods all around us, so we're thinking it's going to burn rapidly.
Many people lost their workplaces.
It holds memories, because I enjoyed working in this kitchen. It was like my hobby, both at home and here. It was my hobby.
Others feel neglected by the fire brigades.
There was no trace of the fire brigade up here. Okay, I get it, they focused on the villages. It makes sense. But we are also part of the village. We are the last house of Patras.
Fire brigades all around the continent are hard at work managing and putting the fires out. But at times, the blaze is just too much.
We're putting out what the fire brigades aren't putting out, or what they don't have time to put out because there are several fires. It's complicated for them to extinguish the fire because there are several active fires in different towns. It's getting more complicated for them.
Scientists and experts around the world warn that these are the direct effects of climate change, and they are not projected to ease. Instead, the old continent has to brace itself for more devastating heat waves to come, one after another.
Turkish authorities are looking to eliminate all-inclusive vacation offers. The Turkish daily Sabah reports. This would apply to hotels and restaurants operating under the ever-popular all-you-can-eat formula. The goal of the potential change would be to reduce food waste, as Turkey is experiencing high inflation fueled in part by rising food prices. The all-inclusive formula in Turkish hotels would be replaced by a system where guests order what they want and pay only for what was ordered. In Poland, over 90% of tourists picking Turkey as their vacation destination choose the all-inclusive option. Experts point out that the idea of limiting all-inclusive vacation packages is socially responsible, considering the large amounts of food waste. But from a business perspective, it could backfire, with Polish tourists choosing other destinations like Egypt or Tunisia. The Association of Turkish Restaurants and Hotels is currently preparing a report that will be sent to the president and then to all relevant institutions. But the final decision is to be made after consulting tourists themselves. A Swedish beach is making headlines as a near-Caribbean experience without the need for intercontinental travel. Let's check out the Scandinavian holiday hotspot.
The crystal clear waters attract a large number of beachgoers.
This is why it's famous. It's great here. Best place in Sweden.
The almost white sand doesn't go underappreciated either.
Not in many places in the world. In Rio de Janeiro, for example, it's the same.
But besides tanning, swimming, and enjoying the tropical-like atmosphere, some come to the beach to take inspiration from the picturesque views it offers.
The light is very special. You can see now it comes like a little mist in. It's already changed since I started to paint. Every time you paint it, it's a new picture. It's a new feeling.
The famous beach also offers a lesson in the Swedish history of beachgoing.
The bathing huts are a tradition that goes back all the way to the 1890s here, when the cold air bathing became popular. So to have a bathing hut in Skanör, Falsterbo, Ljunghusen or Höllviken in this area, you need to be a resident.
Beyond these facilities, the Swedish beach also houses migrating birds and an impressive lighthouse.
And that concludes Midday Report. Thank you so much for being with us, and stay tuned for more on TVP World. Goodbye.